The wind cuts across the training yard like a blade, and nobody moves. Frost clings to the stone walls of Ironvale Academy, and every cadet standing in the long line feels the same cold fear settle into their chest. Somewhere beyond the iron gates, a low growl rolls across the courtyard, deep enough to shake the snow from the rooftops. The war beasts are coming. Reyna Kestrel stands near the end of the line, her boots sinking slightly into the frozen ground, her breath rising in short clouds. She is not thinking about glory. She is thinking about survival. Everyone told her this day would decide the rest of her life, and now that it has arrived, she wishes she could disappear into the crowd of taller, stronger, more polished cadets around her. A horn sounds from the gatehouse, sharp and sudden, and the massive doors groan open. The first war beast steps through, and the entire courtyard seems to hold its breath. It is enormous. Its shoulders rise higher than a grown man standing tall, its fur dark as burnt iron, streaked with old scars that tell stories no one dares to ask about. Its eyes are pale gold, sharp as a hawk's, and they sweep across the line of cadets with an intelligence that feels almost human. This is Ashgrave. Every soldier at Ironvale knows the name. Every cadet has heard the rumors. Ashgrave has outlived 3 handlers. Ashgrave has fought in battles that ended wars. Ashgrave does not choose weak partners. Reyna's hands curl into fists at her sides. She has heard the whispers about herself too. The instructors do not think she belongs here. Her combat scores are average at best. Her discipline record is thick with write-ups for talking back, for questioning orders, for refusing to stay quiet when she believes something is wrong. More than one officer has told her, quietly and without kindness, that she will not be chosen today, that she should prepare herself for a support role, far from the front lines, far from any beast worth bonding with. She tells herself she does not care. She tells herself this every single day, and every single day it becomes a little harder to believe. The beast begins its walk down the line. It moves slowly, deliberately, each paw placed with the calm confidence of a creature that has never once doubted itself. It stops before the first cadet, a tall young man named Owen Pierce, who stands rigid with pride, his chin lifted, clearly certain he will be the one chosen. Ashgrave sniffs once, studies him with those pale golden eyes, and moves on without a sound. Owen's face falls, but he holds his position, too proud to show his disappointment. The beast continues. It pauses before a cadet named Lily Hartman, circles her fully, and again moves on. It stops before 3 more cadets, each time performing the same quiet ritual of inspection, each time leaving without any sign of interest. The courtyard grows tense with anticipation. Somewhere behind the line, an instructor named Mara Doyle watches with narrowed eyes, arms crossed, waiting to see which cadet will be lucky enough, or perhaps unlucky enough, to be chosen by the most dangerous war beast in the Academy's long history. Reyna watches the beast approach, and for the first time since she woke up this morning, she feels something other than dread. She feels curiosity. There is something about the way Ashgrave studies each cadet, something careful and calculating, as if it is not simply searching for strength, but searching for something else entirely, something the instructors cannot measure with their tests and their scores. The beast reaches the cadet standing just before her, a broad-shouldered young man who flexes slightly, clearly hoping to impress. Ashgrave gives him barely a glance before moving on. And then it stops in front of Reyna. The entire courtyard falls silent. Even the wind seems to pause. Reyna feels her heart slam against her ribs as the massive creature lowers its head and studies her with an intensity that makes her want to look away. She does not look away. She has spent her entire life refusing to look away from things that frighten her, and she is not about to start now. Ashgrave's golden eyes hold hers for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, the great beast lowers itself to the ground and sits. For a moment, nobody understands what has happened. The gesture is so simple, so quiet, that it takes several seconds for the meaning to settle over the crowd. Then a murmur ripples down the line of cadets, growing louder, turning into open whispers of disbelief. Ashgrave has chosen. Instructor Doyle steps forward, her expression caught somewhere between shock and suspicion. She studies Reyna, as if seeing her for the first time, then turns her gaze to the beast, searching for some sign that this is a mistake, some indication that the creature will rise and continue down the line. Ashgrave does not move. It remains seated before Reyna, patient and unshaken, its golden eyes never leaving her face. Reyna does not know what to do. Her training never covered this moment because nobody expected she would ever reach it. She glances around at the stunned faces of her fellow cadets, at the disbelief written across every expression, and then back at the massive creature sitting calmly before her, waiting. She takes a slow step forward. Ashgrave does not flinch. She lifts her hand, uncertain, and rests it gently against the side of the beast's head. The fur is coarse but warm, and beneath her palm she can feel the slow, steady rhythm of its breathing. Something passes between them in that moment, something she cannot explain, a quiet understanding that settles into her chest and refuses to leave. The bonding horn sounds from the gatehouse, confirming what everyone already knows. The pairing is complete. It cannot be undone. Reyna Kestrel, the cadet nobody expected to be chosen, is now bonded to the most legendary war beast in the history of Iron Veil Academy. The reaction is immediate and far from celebratory. Cadets whisper behind raised hands as she walks back toward the barracks, Ashgrave padding silently at her side. Officers exchange troubled glances. Even her closest friend among the cadets, a quiet young woman named Ivy Marsh, looks at her with an expression that mixes joy for her friend with obvious confusion about how such a thing could happen. Colonel Grant Whitfield, the Academy's stern and unyielding commander, summons Reyna to his office within the hour. He sits behind a heavy wooden desk, his expression unreadable, studying her the way Ashgrave had studied her in the courtyard, searching for something he cannot quite identify. He tells her plainly that this pairing troubles him. Ashgrave has never chosen a cadet with her record before. Her combat scores are unremarkable. Her disciplinary history is long. Every previous handler the beast has bonded with was among the strongest, sharpest, most obedient soldiers the Academy had ever produced. He does not understand why the beast would choose differently now. Reyna does not have an answer for him. She only knows what she felt in that courtyard, that strange and powerful sense of being truly seen for the first time in her life. She tells the colonel this, expecting him to dismiss her words as foolish sentiment. Instead, he studies her for a long moment in silence, and something in his stern expression softens, just slightly. He warns her that the road ahead will not be easy. Ashgrave is not like other war beasts. It does not simply obey commands. It tests its handlers, challenges them, refuses to follow blindly. Its previous handler was one of the Academy's finest soldiers, a man who commanded absolute respect from every creature and cadet under his authority, and even he struggled at times to earn the beast's full trust. Reyna leaves the office with more questions than answers, but one thing has become clear to her. Whatever reason Ashgrave had for choosing her, she intends to prove that the beast was right to do so. That evening, she visits the stables where Ashgrave has been given quarters befitting its size and status. The other war beasts rest in their pens nearby, massive shapes curled in the shadows, but none of them compare to the creature waiting for her in the largest enclosure at the far end of the building. Ashgrave rises the moment she enters, its golden eyes catching the lantern light. It does not approach her immediately. Instead, it watches, waiting, the same patient intensity she remembers from the courtyard. She steps closer, uncertain, and asks the question that has been circling her mind since the bonding ceremony ended. Why her? Out of every cadet in that line, cadets stronger, faster, more skilled, more respected, why choose the one nobody wanted? Ashgrave does not answer, of course. It cannot speak the way humans do. But it tilts its head slightly, studying her with an expression that feels almost like understanding. And then it does something unexpected. It lowers itself to the ground and rests its massive head against her shoulder, a gesture so gentle it seems impossible for a creature of such size and power. Reyna feels something shift inside her chest, a warmth she has not felt in a very long time. Whatever doubts the instructors have, whatever whispers follow her through the halls of the Academy, she decides in that quiet moment that she will not let this creature down. She does not yet understand what Ashgrave sees in her, what history it carries, or what future it has chosen her for. But she intends to find out. Outside the stable, the moon rises over Iron Veil Academy, casting long silver shadows across the frozen courtyard where, just hours before, an entire line of cadets stood waiting to learn their fate. None of them could have predicted this outcome. Not the instructors, not the colonel, not even Reyna herself. But somewhere in the ancient memory of the great war beast resting beside her, a plan has already begun to take shape, one that will pull Reyna Kestrel far beyond the walls of the academy, into dangers she cannot yet imagine, and toward a truth about Ashgrave's past that will change everything she thought she understood about the beast, about herself, and about the bond now unbreakably tying them together. For now, she simply sits beside the great creature in the quiet dark, her hand resting against its scarred fur, and allows herself, just for a moment, to feel something she has not felt since arriving at this cold and demanding academy. She feels chosen. The following morning arrives with a briskness that matches the mood across the academy grounds. Reyna wakes before the dawn bell, her body still adjusting to the strange new reality of her situation. She dresses quickly and makes her way to the stables, half expecting to find the bonding had somehow been a dream. It is not. Ashgrave waits for her exactly where she left it, alert and watchful, as though it never slept at all. As she leads the beast out into the training yard for the first time, she becomes acutely aware of every eye following her movements. Cadets pause mid-exercise to stare. Instructors exchange low comments behind cupped hands. Even the other war beasts seem to shift uneasily in their pens as Ashgrave passes, as though recognizing something in the old creature that unsettles them. Reyna keeps her chin lifted and her pace steady, refusing to let the attention rattle her. She has spent her whole life being underestimated, being told she does not measure up, and she has never once let it stop her from moving forward. She will not start now, not when the stakes have never been higher. The training instructor assigned to oversee her first session, a sharp-eyed woman named Captain Nora Sinclair, watches the pairing with obvious skepticism. She orders Reyna through a series of basic commands meant to test the beast's responsiveness. Ashgrave performs each one, but with a strange delay, a pause before every action, as though it is choosing to obey, rather than simply reacting on instinct, the way other war beasts do. Captain Sinclair notes this with a frown, jotting something into her ledger. She tells Reyna plainly that this behavior is unusual, that most war beasts respond immediately to their handler's commands without hesitation. Ashgrave's delay suggests either a flaw in the bonding or a creature accustomed to making its own decisions rather than following orders blindly. Reyna already suspects it is the second explanation. She has felt it in the way the beast watches her, evaluating, weighing her choices before deciding whether to act on them. It is not disobedience exactly. It is something closer to partnership, an insistence on being treated as an equal rather than a tool. She finds she does not mind this at all. If anything, she respects it. As the session continues, something remarkable happens. During a routine defensive drill, Reyna hesitates, uncertain about the correct positioning, and instead of waiting for her to figure it out, Ashgrave shifts its stance first, subtly guiding her into the proper form through its own movement. It is teaching her, not the other way around. Captain Sinclair notices this too, and for the first time, her skeptical expression flickers with something like curiosity. She says nothing more that day, but Reyna catches her watching closely for the remainder of the session, studying the strange dynamic unfolding between Cadet and Beast with newfound interest. By the time the session ends, word has already spread through the academy that the unlikely pairing is proving far more complicated and far more interesting than anyone expected. 3 weeks pass, and the routine of training becomes something Reyna could never have imagined for herself. Each morning she rises before the bell, walks to the stables through the cold half-light, and finds Ashgrave already awake, already watching the door as though counting the minutes until her arrival. Each session brings new challenges, new tests she did not know she was being given, until she has already passed or failed them. The other cadets keep their distance, some out of respect, most out of simple confusion about how to treat someone who has been granted a partnership none of them believe she deserves. Ivy Marsh remains loyal, sitting with Reyna during meals, and listening patiently as she describes the strange, wordless conversations she seems to be having with the ancient creature. But even Ivy admits she does not fully understand what is happening between her friend and the legendary beast. Reyna does not fully understand it either. She only knows that something has shifted inside her since the bonding ceremony, some quiet confidence she never possessed before, as though Ashgrave's steady presence has given her permission to trust herself in ways she never allowed before. The trouble begins on a gray afternoon during a joint training exercise involving several cadet and beast pairings at once. The exercise is meant to simulate a coordinated defense scenario, testing how well handlers can direct their beasts in response to sudden, unpredictable threats. Captain Sinclair oversees the drill from a raised platform, calling out scenarios for the cadets to respond to in real time. When the signal sounds for Reyna's group to advance, Ashgrave does something none of the other beasts do. Instead of moving directly toward the designated target as instructed, it circles wide, taking a longer path that seems, at first glance, to be a mistake or a failure to follow the command properly. Captain Sinclair calls out a correction, her voice sharp with irritation. But before Reyna can redirect the beast, the exercise reveals its purpose. A second target, hidden behind a false wall constructed for the drill, springs into view exactly where Ashgrave's wider path would have intercepted it first. The beast had anticipated the hidden element of the exercise before anyone announced it, reading the terrain and the instructor's patterns in ways none of the other pairings had considered. The other cadets fail to respond in time. Reyna and Ashgrave, through the beast's unconventional instinct, succeed where the straightforward approach would have failed. Captain Sinclair says nothing for a long moment, staring down at the training field with an expression Reyna cannot quite read. Then she makes a note in her ledger and moves on to the next scenario without comment. But that evening, Reyna is summoned once again to Colonel Whitfield's office, and this time, the conversation takes an entirely different direction. The colonel does not begin with warnings this time. Instead, he asks her to describe, in detail, everything she has observed about Ashgrave's behavior since the bonding. Reyna tells him about the delayed responses to commands, the strange independence in how the beast approaches problems, the way it seems to be testing her judgment as much as demonstrating its own capabilities. The colonel listens closely, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finishes, he is quiet for a long moment, drumming his fingers against the surface of his desk. Then he tells her something she was not expecting to hear. Ashgrave was not always a solitary war beast. Long before it arrived at Ironvale Academy, long before its first documented handler, it led a pack of war beasts across the wild borderlands beyond the Academy's protected territory. It was, in every sense that mattered, an alpha, a creature others of its kind followed without question, respected for its intelligence and its uncanny ability to sense danger before it arrived. Reyna listens with growing fascination as the colonel explains what little is known about this chapter of Ashgrave's history. The pack served alongside a legendary handler decades ago, a soldier whose name is still spoken with reverence in certain corners of the Academy. When that handler was lost during a conflict along the eastern border, something in the pack's structure broke. Without their bonded leader to guide them, and with Ashgrave grieving in ways the records struggle to fully capture, the pack scattered into the wilderness. For years, sightings of feral war beasts moving through the borderlands have been reported by traveling merchants and border patrols, creatures too intelligent to be simple animals, too coordinated to be a random collection of strays. The Academy has always assumed these reports referred to an unrelated group of escaped or abandoned beasts. Now, watching Ashgrave's behavior through Reyna's careful observations, the colonel is beginning to suspect something far more significant. He believes Ashgrave never stopped being their alpha. He believes the ancient creature has spent years searching for a new handler capable of helping it reclaim what was lost, someone with the instinct and the courage to venture into dangerous territory that most trained soldiers would avoid, someone unafraid to break from convention when convention fails to serve the greater purpose. Someone, in other words, exactly like the cadet sitting across from him now, the one everyone assumed would never be chosen for anything important at all. Reyna sits in stunned silence as the weight of this revelation settles over her. She had assumed her bonding with Ashgrave was simply an unusual match, a mystery she would eventually understand through patience and training. She had not imagined that the ancient beast carried an entire history of loss and searching, that its choice of her in that frozen courtyard was not random at all, but the culmination of a long and careful search. She asks the colonel what this means for her, what responsibility now rests on her shoulders, because of a choice she did not fully understand when she made it. He tells her plainly that the decision is hers alone. The Academy cannot order a cadet into borderland territory against their will. especially not for a mission this uncertain, this potentially dangerous. If she wishes to continue her training as a standard handler, remaining within the safety of the Academy grounds, no one will think less of her for it. But if she wishes to help Ashgrave finish what it started years ago, to track down the scattered pack, and attempt to bring them back under some form of order before they cause further trouble along the borderlands, the Colonel is prepared to authorize a small strike team to accompany her, once her training reaches a sufficient level. Reyna leaves the office that night with her mind racing. She walks slowly back toward the stables, the cold air doing little to clear the storm of thoughts crowding her head. She has spent her entire life at Ironvale Academy, trying to prove she belongs, trying to silence the doubts of instructors who saw her only as trouble waiting to happen. Now she is being asked to consider a mission that could either finally prove her worth beyond any doubt, or confirm every criticism ever leveled against her, this time with consequences far more serious than a disciplinary write-up. She finds Ashgrave waiting in the stable exactly as she left it that morning, its golden eyes catching the last light of the setting sun. She sits beside the great creature and tells it everything the Colonel revealed, watching closely for any reaction, any sign that the beast understands what she is saying. Ashgrave's ears shift slightly at certain words, particularly when she mentions the pack, the borderlands, the lost handler from decades past. Its posture changes, growing tense in a way she has not seen before, an old grief surfacing beneath the calm exterior it usually maintains. Reyna reaches out and rests her hand against the beast's scarred shoulder, feeling the tension there, the weight of years spent carrying a loss it could never fully express. She understands now why Ashgrave chose her in that courtyard, why it looked past the strongest and most polished cadets to settle instead on the one everyone else had already written off. It did not need a soldier who followed rules perfectly. It needed someone willing to question those rules when questioning them mattered most. It needed someone who understood, in her own quiet way, what it felt like to be misunderstood, dismissed, and underestimated, and who had learned to keep moving forward anyway. She makes her decision that night, sitting in the quiet stable, with the ancient war beast beside her. She will not shy away from this responsibility. She will train harder than she has ever trained in her life. She will learn everything she can about the borderlands and the scattered pack waiting somewhere beyond them, and when the time comes, she will help Ashgrave finish the journey it began so many years before she ever arrived at this academy. The following weeks bring a dramatic shift in Reyna's training schedule. Colonel Whitfield assigns additional instructors to work with her, specialists in borderland survival, tracking, and negotiation tactics used specifically for handling feral or traumatized war beasts. The training is grueling, pushing her far beyond anything she experienced during her earlier years at the academy, but she finds herself rising to meet each new challenge with a determination that surprises even her closest instructors. Captain Sinclair, once openly skeptical of the pairing, becomes one of Reyna's most dedicated trainers, recognizing in her a resilience that standard testing methods had failed to measure. Under her guidance, Reyna learns to read terrain the way Ashgrave does, to anticipate danger through subtle environmental clues, rather than relying solely on direct observation. She learns tracking techniques used by border patrols, methods for approaching wild creatures without triggering their defensive instincts, and negotiation tactics designed to re-establish trust with beasts who have learned, through hard experience, that trust often leads to loss. Throughout it all, Ashgrave remains close, watching, guiding, occasionally intervening when Reyna's human instincts lead her toward a mistake the beast can sense before she recognizes it herself. Their bond deepens with each passing day, growing from the uncertain partnership of strangers into something closer to genuine understanding, two very different creatures learning to move through the world as a single unit. Not everyone at the academy supports the growing plan to send Reyna into the borderlands. Some instructors argue the mission is too dangerous for a cadet still early in her training, regardless of how quickly she has progressed. Others question whether the scattered pack, having lived wild for so many years, can truly be reasoned with at all, suggesting instead that the strike team should be prepared for confrontation rather than reunion. Reyna hears these concerns, some of them whispered behind her back, others voiced directly to her face by cadets who resent the sudden attention and resources being devoted to her training. She does not let the criticism shake her resolve. She has spent her entire life proving people wrong about her limitations, and she does not intend to stop now, not when the stakes have finally become something worth fighting for. As the weeks draw the Academy closer to the day when Reyna's training will be deemed sufficient for deployment, a new sense of purpose settles over her. She no longer walks the halls of Ironvale Academy as the cadet nobody expected to matter. She walks them as Ashgrave's chosen partner, preparing for a mission that will test everything she has learned, everything she has become, since that frozen morning in the courtyard, when a legendary war beast looked past every other cadet in the line and sat down before her instead. The Borderlands wait, vast and unpredictable, holding secrets about Ashgrave's past that even the Colonel's records cannot fully explain. Somewhere within that wild territory, a scattered pack moves without direction, without the alpha who once held them together, causing trouble that grows more serious with each passing season. Reyna does not yet know what she will find when she finally crosses beyond the Academy's protected borders, but she knows, with a certainty she has never felt before, that she is ready to find out. The morning of departure arrives colder than any Reyna has felt since her first winter at the Academy. She stands at the eastern gate as the strike team assembles around her, 5 soldiers chosen for their experience in borderland operations, each one studying her with a mixture of curiosity and quiet doubt. She has heard the whispers already, the questions about whether a cadet still finishing her training truly belongs on a mission this dangerous. She keeps her expression steady and says nothing in response, letting Ashgrave's calm presence beside her speak for itself. The team leader, a seasoned officer named Captain Dale Ashford, addresses the group before they set out. He is a tall man with a weathered face and a voice that carries authority without needing to be raised. He explains the mission parameters clearly. Their goal is not confrontation. Their goal is location and observation, tracking the scattered pack's movements and reporting back before any direct contact is attempted. Reyna's role, given her unique bond with Ashgrave, is to help interpret the pack's behavior and, if the opportunity arises safely, attempt the beginnings of reconnection. Reyna listens carefully, memorizing every instruction, aware that this mission will test not only her physical training, but every lesson she has absorbed about patience, restraint, and trust. She glances at Ashgrave, whose golden eyes remain fixed on the horizon beyond the gate, on the vast wilderness stretching out toward territory the beast once called home. The gate opens, and the team moves out into the borderlands. The first days of travel pass in careful, deliberate stages. The terrain shifts from the familiar hills surrounding the Academy into dense forest, then rocky highlands where the wind cuts sharper and the nights grow colder still. Reyna learns quickly that everything Captain Sinclair taught her about reading terrain applies here in ways far more immediate than any classroom exercise could prepare her for. Every broken branch, every disturbed patch of earth, every unusual silence in the surrounding wildlife carries meaning she must learn to interpret correctly and quickly. Ashgrave proves invaluable during these early days, its senses far sharper than any instrument the team carries. It catches scents on the wind long before the human trackers notice anything unusual, pausing mid-stride with an alertness that immediately signals the rest of the team to slow their pace and observe their surroundings more carefully. On the 3rd day, this instinct saves them from stumbling into a hidden ravine concealed beneath a deceptive covering of fallen leaves, a trap that could easily have injured several members of the team had Ashgrave not redirected their path at the last possible moment. Captain Ashford begins to trust the pairing more with each passing day, though he remains professionally cautious, unwilling to let his guard down completely until he sees clear evidence that Reyna can handle the pressures of true field conditions. That evidence arrives sooner than expected, on the 5th night of their journey, when the first signs of the scattered pack finally appear. It begins with tracks, unusual paw prints far larger than any wild predator native to the region, discovered near a shallow stream where the team has stopped to refill their water supplies. The prints are fresh, no more than a day old, and they follow a pattern too deliberate, too organized, to belong to ordinary animals moving purely on instinct. Ashgrave studies the tracks with an intensity Reyna has never witnessed before, its entire body growing tense, its nostrils flaring as it absorbs every trace of scent left behind. When it finally lifts its head, something in its posture has changed entirely. It is no longer simply a war beast on a mission. It is, unmistakably, an alpha recognizing the presence of its former pack for the first time in years. Captain Ashford orders the team to make camp for the night, rather than pressing forward in fading light, a decision that frustrates Reyna in the moment, but one she later recognizes as wise caution. The team sets watch in rotating shifts, and Reyna finds herself unable to sleep during her own designated rest period, her mind circling endlessly around the possibility that tomorrow might bring them face to face with the very creatures Ashgrave lost so many years ago. She spends part of the night sitting beside Ashgrave near the edge of camp, watching the stars emerge through gaps in the forest canopy. The beast remains restless too, occasionally lifting its head toward sounds in the distance that Reyna cannot detect, sounds that mean something to a creature with senses far beyond human capability. She asks quietly what it must feel like, after all these years, to be this close to finding them again. Ashgrave does not answer in words, of course, but it leans its massive head against her shoulder, in a gesture she has come to recognize as its way of communicating something too complicated for simple commands or reactions. She wraps an arm around the beast's neck and stays there until the first hint of dawn begins to color the sky. The next morning brings the moment the entire mission has been building toward. As the team moves cautiously through a narrow valley, following the trail of tracks deeper into unfamiliar territory, they emerge into a wide clearing surrounded by tall rock formations. And there, scattered across the open ground, they find them. The pack. There are 7 of them in total, each one a war beast, similar to Ashgrave in build and bearing, though smaller, younger, clearly born or raised without the guidance of a proper handler for years. Their fur is matted and unkempt, their movements sharp with the wariness of creatures who have learned through hard experience that unfamiliar approaches often mean danger. The moment they sense the strike team's presence, the entire pack rises as one, forming a defensive line, low growls rippling through the clearing like distant thunder. Captain Ashford immediately signals the team to hold position, his hand raised in a gesture that freezes every soldier in place. Reyna's heart pounds against her ribs as she watches the pack's tense formation, aware that a single wrong movement from anyone in the strike team could turn this delicate encounter into something far more dangerous. Then Ashgrave steps forward. It moves slowly, deliberately, exactly as it did during the bonding ceremony weeks earlier, and the pack's reaction is immediate and unmistakable. The growling falters. Ears that were pressed back in aggression begin to shift, uncertain, as recognition dawns across the pack's collective posture. One by one, the younger beasts lower their heads, not in submission exactly, but in something closer to disbelief, as though seeing a ghost they never expected to encounter again. The largest of the pack, a beast with distinctive white markings along its shoulders that Reyna will later learn is considered the pack's temporary leader in Ashgrave's absence, steps forward to meet the old alpha in the center of the clearing. The two creatures circle each other slowly, exchanging silent signals Reyna cannot fully interpret, though she recognizes enough from her training to understand this is a negotiation. A careful renegotiation of hierarchy and trust between two beasts who once shared a bond neither ever expected to lose. The tension in the clearing stretches unbearably long. Captain Ashford keeps the team perfectly still, understanding instinctively that any interference now could destroy whatever fragile reconnection is taking place between the two beasts. Reyna watches, barely breathing, her hand resting unconsciously against the small blade at her belt, though she knows deep down that violence is the last thing this moment calls for. Finally, the white-marked beast lowers itself to the ground, exactly as Ashgrave did before Reyna weeks ago in the Academy courtyard. It is an act of deference, an acknowledgement of old hierarchy restored. The rest of the pack follows suit, one by one lowering themselves in a ripple of quiet submission that spreads across the clearing until every wild beast rests calmly on the ground before their returned alpha. Reyna feels tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the significance of what she has just witnessed. Years of loss, years of a scattered pack wandering without direction, and in the span of a few tense minutes, some fragile version of what was lost has begun to be restored. But the reunion, as powerful as it is, does not solve the deeper problem the team was sent to address. The pack, however calmed by Ashgrave's return, remains a group of feral creatures who have spent years operating outside any human oversight, responsible for disrupting supply lines and causing tension with settlements along the borderland territories. Captain Ashford explains this reality carefully once the immediate tension has passed, reminding Reyna and the rest of the team that reconnecting with Ashgrave is only the first step. The pack must eventually be brought back under some form of structured guidance, integrated safely into territory where they will no longer pose unintended threats to travelers and border communities. This will require more than a single encounter in a remote clearing. It will require patience, continued presence, and eventually, difficult decisions about how to reintegrate 7 wild war beasts into a world that has largely forgotten they exist, all while a neighboring territory grows increasingly frustrated with reports of unexplained disruptions along its borders. Reyna spends the following days working alongside Ashgrave to slowly re-establish trust between the pack and the human strike team. Progress is slow and requires enormous patience. The younger beasts remain wary of the soldiers, some approaching cautiously to investigate, others keeping their distance entirely, watching from the tree line with guarded curiosity. She learns to move carefully among them, taking cues from Ashgrave about which beasts are ready for closer contact and which still need time and space. She spends long hours simply sitting near the edges of their temporary camp, allowing the pack to grow accustomed to her presence, without forcing interaction, a technique Captain Sinclair had drilled into her during those final weeks of specialized training before departure. Slowly, incrementally, trust begins to build. The white-marked beast, whom Reyna comes to think of privately as Frost, due to the pale coloring along its shoulders, proves particularly receptive to her careful approach, often positioning itself between her and the more skittish younger members of the pack, as though offering a kind of protective endorsement. Captain Ashford sends regular reports back to the Academy detailing their progress, and word begins to spread that the mission, once considered a long shot at best, is showing genuine promise. Colonel Whitfield authorizes additional resources to support the operation, understanding that what Reyna and Ashgrave have accomplished in these first weeks could represent a significant breakthrough, not just for this particular pack, but for future understanding of how deeply war beasts form lasting social bonds. But not everyone views this progress favorably. Reports begin filtering in from the neighboring territory, whose officials have grown increasingly concerned about the presence of a reunited pack near their shared border. Diplomatic tensions rise as rumors spread about wild creatures gathering in numbers not seen in years, rumors that grow more exaggerated and alarming with each retelling, threatening to spiral into a serious international incident unless the situation can be resolved quickly and carefully. Reyna finds herself caught in the middle of pressures far beyond anything her training prepared her for, balancing the delicate, ongoing work of reintegrating a wary pack of war beasts with the mounting political urgency demanding faster results than the careful process actually allows. She begins to understand, in ways she never fully appreciated during her time at the Academy, just how complicated true leadership can become when the needs of patience and the demands of politics pull in entirely opposite directions. Through it all, Ashgrave remains a steady, guiding presence, watching over both its reunited pack and the young handler who fought so hard to earn the trust it placed in her from the very beginning. Reyna draws strength from that steadiness, reminding herself each difficult day that she was chosen for this precise reason, because she understood, better than any polished, celebrated cadet ever could, what it meant to move forward despite doubt, despite pressure, despite the constant voices insisting she did not belong. As the days stretch into weeks, the situation along the border grows more urgent, and Reyna realizes that the quiet, careful reconnection she has been nurturing may soon be tested by forces far beyond her control. The message arrives on a gray morning, carried by a courier who rides hard into the strike team's camp with news that changes everything. Officials from the neighboring territory have grown tired of waiting for a diplomatic resolution. A patrol group from their side has been authorized to enter the borderland region directly, with orders to capture, or, if necessary, eliminate the scattered pack before it can cause further disruption to their settlements. The courier explains that the patrol is already moving, expected to reach the pack's current location within 2 days. Captain Ashford reads the message twice, his expression darkening with each pass. He gathers the team immediately, laying out the harsh reality of their situation. 2 days is not enough time to complete the slow, careful reintegration process Reyna and Ashgrave have been building, yet allowing an armed patrol to reach the pack unannounced could result in exactly the kind of violent confrontation the entire mission was designed to prevent. Reyna feels the weight of the situation settle over her like a physical thing. Weeks of patient, careful work, of earning trust one cautious step at a time, now threatened by a deadline she has no control over. She looks toward the pack resting near the tree line, toward Frost and the younger beasts who have only just begun to feel safe in the presence of humans again, and she refuses to let that fragile trust be destroyed by a misunderstanding born of fear and political frustration. She proposes an idea to Captain Ashford, one that immediately draws concern from several members of the strike team. Rather than waiting for the neighboring patrol to arrive and risk an uncontrolled first encounter, she suggests moving to intercept them directly, using her bond with Ashgrave and the trust she has built with the pack to demonstrate, clearly and immediately, that the beasts are neither a threat nor beyond the reach of proper guidance. Captain Ashford hesitates, reminding her that intercepting an armed foreign patrol carries enormous risk, that misjudged intentions on either side could spark exactly the violent outcome she hopes to avoid. Reyna acknowledges the danger but argues that remaining passive carries an even greater risk, that allowing the patrol to reach the pack without any prior context practically guarantees a confrontation neither side intends, but neither side will be prepared to prevent. The debate continues late into the night, with several members of the strike team voicing sharp disagreement over the wisdom of Reyna's plan. It is Ashgrave, in its own quiet way, that ultimately settles the matter. As the discussion grows heated, the great beast rises and moves toward the edge of camp, facing the direction from which the foreign patrol is expected to arrive, its posture alert and purposeful. The message is unmistakable to anyone who has spent these past weeks learning to read its signals. It intends to meet this challenge head-on, and it is asking Reyna to stand beside it. Captain Ashford studies the beast for a long moment, then looks back at Reyna, weighing the trust he has built in her judgment against the enormous risk of what she is proposing. And finally he agrees, though he insists on accompanying her personally, along with 2 additional soldiers, while the remainder of the team stays behind to protect the pack in case the interception fails. They set out before dawn the next morning, moving quickly along the most likely approach route the foreign patrol would take, based on the courier's information. Reyna rides at Ashgrave's side, her mind racing through every possible scenario, every way this encounter could go wrong, despite her best intentions. She has learned enough during her time in the borderlands to know that even the most carefully planned encounters can unravel in an instant when fear and misunderstanding enter the equation. They spot the patrol shortly after midday, a group of roughly a dozen soldiers moving cautiously through a wooded pass, weapons ready, clearly prepared for the possibility of encountering hostile creatures. Captain Ashford raises a hand, signaling his small group to slow their approach and announce their presence clearly, rather than risk any appearance of ambush. The foreign patrol's leader, a stern officer who introduces himself curtly as Commander Reed Chapman, regards the approaching group with obvious suspicion, his hand resting near his weapon even as he acknowledges Captain Ashford's formal greeting. He explains, without softening his words, that his orders are clear regarding the scattered pack, and he has little patience for delays or negotiations that might put his own soldiers at further risk. Reyna steps forward before the tension can escalate further, aware that everything hinges on the next few minutes. She explains, as clearly and calmly as she can manage, the reality of what has been happening in the weeks since the strike team first located the pack. She describes Ashgrave's history, the reconnection that has taken place, the slow but genuine progress toward reintegrating the beasts safely, rather than treating them as an uncontrollable threat. Commander Chapman listens with visible skepticism, unconvinced by words alone. He states plainly that his superiors will require proof, not promises, before he can justify altering his orders. Reyna understands immediately what kind of proof he means, and despite the danger involved, she knows there is only one way to provide it. She asks Ashgrave to demonstrate. The great beast steps forward into the open ground between the 2 groups, and for a tense moment, several of Commander Chapman's soldiers raise their weapons instinctively, clearly expecting aggression. But Ashgrave does something entirely unexpected. It lowers itself slowly to the ground, exactly as it did before Reyna in the academy courtyard weeks ago. an unmistakable gesture of calm and controlled restraint, from a creature that could, if it chose, pose an enormous threat to everyone present. Reyna walks forward and kneels beside the beast, resting her hand against its massive head in full view of the foreign patrol, demonstrating the depth of trust and connection between them, without a single word needing to be spoken. She holds Commander Chapman's gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to let doubt creep into her expression, even as her heart pounds furiously beneath her calm exterior. Slowly, the tension in Commander Chapman's posture begins to ease, though his caution does not disappear entirely. He studies the scene for a long moment, before finally lowering his own hand away from his weapon, a small but significant gesture that ripples through his soldiers, prompting them to lower their own readiness in turn. He tells Reyna, with grudging respect, that he has never witnessed anything quite like what he just saw, and while he remains unconvinced that the entire pack can be trusted so easily, he is willing to grant a temporary delay before proceeding with his original orders, provided the strike team can demonstrate similar progress with the remaining beasts within a limited time frame. It is not the full resolution Reyna hoped for, but it is enough. It buys the time needed to continue the delicate work of reintegration without the immediate threat of violent confrontation hanging over every step. Captain Ashford negotiates the specific terms of the delay with Commander Chapman, establishing a joint observation arrangement that will allow both sides to monitor the pack's continued progress toward peaceful reintegration. As the two groups part ways, each returning to their respective camps, Reyna allows herself a brief moment of relief, though she knows the hardest work still lies ahead. The delay grants precious time, but it does not eliminate the underlying challenge of proving, beyond any doubt, that the pack can be safely reintegrated into a world that has spent years fearing and misunderstanding them. Over the following days, Reyna throws herself into the work with renewed urgency, aware that every interaction now carries the weight of the agreement she negotiated with Commander Chapman. She works closely with Frost and the other pack members, gradually introducing them to controlled interactions with soldiers from both the Academy's strike team and, eventually, cautious observers from Commander Chapman's patrol as well. The process is not without setbacks. On one particularly tense afternoon, a sudden loud noise from a passing supply cart startles one of the younger, more skittish pack members, triggering a brief but frightening moment of defensive aggression that sends several observers scrambling for safety. Reyna moves quickly, working alongside Ashgrave to calm the startled beast before the situation can spiral into something far more serious, drawing on every lesson learned during her intensive training back at the Academy. The incident serves as a sobering reminder of just how fragile the progress remains, how easily weeks of careful work could unravel in a single unexpected moment. Commander Chapman, watching from a cautious distance, notes the incident with visible concern, and Reyna understands she must work even harder to demonstrate that such moments, while possible, do not represent the true nature of what she and Ashgrave have built with the pack. She adjusts her approach in the days that follow, incorporating additional structure into the pack's daily routine, establishing clearer boundaries, and signals that help even the most anxious members understand what to expect from their continued interactions with humans. Slowly, painstakingly, trust begins to solidify into something more resilient than it was before, tested and strengthened by the very setback that briefly threatened to undo it. As the deadline established with Commander Chapman approaches, Reyna finds herself reflecting on how far she has come since that frozen morning in the Academy courtyard when Ashgrave first sat before her, choosing her over every other cadet in the line. She thinks of the doubts that followed her throughout her early training, the whispers that suggested she would never measure up to the responsibility placed upon her. She thinks of how those same qualities, the willingness to question convention, the refusal to back down in the face of pressure, the instinct to act decisively even when the safer choice would be to remain passive, have proven to be exactly what this mission required all along. The final assessment with Commander Chapman looms just ahead, and Reyna knows that everything she and Ashgrave have worked toward, the fragile peace between two territories, the safety of a pack finally finding its way back from years of scattered wandering, and the deeper truth about what kind of handler she was always meant to become, will be tested one final time before this journey reaches its conclusion. The morning of the final assessment arrives with a stillness that feels heavier than any of the tense moments that came before it. Reyna wakes before the rest of the camp, unable to sleep through the final hours before everything she has built these past weeks will be judged, once and for all, by Commander Chapman and the officials who sent him. She finds Ashgrave already awake, standing at the edge of camp, facing the direction where the assessment will take place, as though the old beast senses the significance of this day just as clearly as she does. She dresses in silence and walks to where the pack rests nearby, taking a moment to move quietly among them one final time before the observers arrive. Frost lifts its head as she approaches, no longer wary of her presence the way it once was, and rests its massive head briefly against her outstretched hand, a gesture of trust that would have seemed impossible when the strike team first stumbled into this clearing weeks ago. Captain Ashford joins her shortly after, his expression carrying the same quiet tension she feels in her own chest. He reminds her, gently, that whatever happens today, the progress they have made together represents something genuinely remarkable, regardless of how Commander Chapman ultimately chooses to report it to his superiors. Reyna appreciates the reassurance, but she cannot fully shake the weight of knowing that today's outcome will determine not only the fate of the pack, but the fragile peace between two territories that has held together on nothing more than a temporary agreement and a great deal of hope. Commander Chapman arrives shortly after midday, accompanied by a small delegation of officials from the neighboring territory, each one studying the scene before them with careful, professional scrutiny. Reyna notices immediately that their expressions remain guarded, unwilling to offer any early indication of how this assessment might conclude. The demonstration begins cautiously, with Reyna guiding the delegation through a series of controlled observations, showing how the pack now responds to structured commands, how they interact peacefully with rotating groups of soldiers from both territories, how far they have progressed from the wary, defensive creatures first encountered in this very clearing. The delegation watches closely, occasionally exchanging quiet comments among themselves that Reyna cannot quite overhear. For the first hour, everything proceeds smoothly, each demonstration reinforcing the careful work of the preceding weeks. But then, without warning, the situation shifts in a way nobody anticipated. A sudden commotion erupts near the far edge of the clearing, where a scouting party from Commander Chapman's own patrol, unfamiliar with the pack's established boundaries, wanders too close to one of the younger, still somewhat anxious pack members, while attempting to get a clearer view of the demonstration. The startled beast reacts instinctively, rising suddenly with a defensive growl that immediately sends ripples of alarm through the observing delegation. Several soldiers reach for their weapons. The rest of the pack, sensing the sudden tension, begins to stir uneasily, their earlier calm threatening to unravel in an instant. Reyna's heart drops as she watches weeks of careful progress teeter on the edge of collapse, aware that a single mistaken action from either side could shatter everything they have built beyond any hope of repair. This is the moment Ashgrave has been waiting for, though not in the way anyone expected. Rather than moving to calm the startled beast directly, which might only heighten the surrounding tension further, Ashgrave does something entirely unprecedented. It moves instead toward the anxious young beast that started the commotion, positioning itself calmly between the startled creature and the nervous soldiers, a physical barrier of steady, reassuring presence. At the same time, it turns its head toward Reyna, holding her gaze with an intensity that carries a clear, unmistakable message. This moment belongs to her. Reyna understands immediately what is being asked of her. She has spent weeks learning to read the pack's signals, to understand their fears and their patterns of trust, and now, in the most critical moment of the entire mission, she must demonstrate that understanding, not through Ashgrave's guidance, but through her own judgment alone. She steps forward, ignoring the tense murmurs from the delegation behind her, and approaches the startled young beast with slow, deliberate movements, keeping her posture low and non-threatening exactly as her training taught her. She speaks in a calm, steady voice, not commanding but reassuring, the same tone she has used countless times over these past weeks to ease the pack through moments of uncertainty. The young beast's growl softens gradually, its rigid posture beginning to relax, as it recognizes her familiar presence, familiar voice, familiar patience. Reyna extends her hand slowly, allowing the creature to make the final choice of whether to accept her calming presence or continue resisting it. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happens. Then the beast lowers its head, accepting her outstretched hand, its tension dissolving into the same quiet trust the rest of the pack has slowly learned to extend toward her over these past difficult weeks. The clearing falls into stunned silence. Even Commander Chapman, watching from a short distance away, appears genuinely moved by what he has just witnessed. The unmistakable proof that the trust built between this pack and its human handlers runs deeper than a single unexpected disturbance could unravel. Reyna rises slowly, keeping her hand resting gently against the calmed beast's head, and turns to face the delegation, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her. She reminds them, calmly and without defensiveness, that setbacks are a natural part of rebuilding trust after years of separation and hardship, that the true measure of progress lies not in the absence of difficult moments, but in the ability to move through them without resorting to fear or violence. Commander Chapman studies her for a long moment, then looks toward Ashgrave, still positioned protectively near the pack, and finally toward the delegation members beside him, who exchange quiet, contemplative glances of their own. After several tense seconds, he steps forward and extends a formal acknowledgement, stating plainly that what he has witnessed today, both the careful progress and the composed handling of an unexpected challenge, exceeds anything his initial orders anticipated. He informs Reyna and Captain Ashford that he will recommend to his superiors that the pack be granted continued observation status, rather than the aggressive intervention originally planned, provided the current arrangement of joint monitoring continues under Reyna's direct involvement. It is not an unconditional resolution, but it is a genuine victory, one that secures the pack's safety and preserves the fragile peace between the two territories without a single life lost or a single act of violence required. As the delegation prepares to depart, Commander Chapman pauses before Reyna one final time, offering something closer to genuine respect than the guarded skepticism he displayed during their first encounter weeks earlier. He tells her that he has served many years along these borderlands and has rarely witnessed a handler capable of what she has accomplished here, especially one so early in her formal training. Reyna accepts the acknowledgement graciously, aware of how far she has traveled from the uncertain cadet who once stood at the end of a long line, convinced she would never be chosen for anything of significance at all. In the weeks that follow, the joint observation arrangement settles into a stable, sustainable routine. The pack, now firmly re-established under Ashgrave's renewed leadership and Reyna's steady guidance, gradually integrates into a designated territory along the borderlands, monitored but no longer feared, respected as the intelligent, socially bonded creatures they have always been, rather than the chaotic threat early rumors once painted them as. Reyna returns periodically to Ironvale Academy to complete the remainder of her formal training, though her time in the borderlands has already transformed her into something far different from the cadet who left those academy walls months earlier. Colonel Whitfield receives her final mission report personally, reading through the detailed account of everything accomplished, with an expression of genuine pride that surprises even Reyna, given how skeptical he had been of her capabilities when this entire journey began. He tells her, in the quiet privacy of his office, that Ashgrave's choice in that frozen courtyard now makes perfect sense to him, something he could not have understood at the time, but recognizes clearly now, having watched her navigate challenges that would have overwhelmed even the Academy's most celebrated cadets. He acknowledges that the very qualities once viewed as disciplinary problems, her willingness to question authority, her refusal to accept convention simply because it was convention, her instinct to act decisively under pressure rather than waiting for permission, proved to be exactly the qualities this mission required from beginning to end. Reyna listens to his words with quiet satisfaction, though she finds herself thinking less about vindication and more about the journey itself, about the pack now safely settled into their new territory, about Frost and the other beasts who have finally found their way back from years of scattered wandering, and about the deep, unshakable bond she has built with the ancient war beast, who saw something in her nobody else recognized, back before she recognized it fully in herself. That evening she returns to the stables one final time before her next assignment, finding Ashgrave resting peacefully in its enclosure, its scarred form relaxed in a way she has rarely witnessed since their bonding began. She sits beside the great creature, resting her hand against its familiar fur, and reflects on everything that brought them to this moment, from that frozen courtyard morning, when nobody expected her to be chosen, through the dangerous borderland journey, that tested every skill and instinct she possessed, to this quiet evening of earned peace. Ashgrave shifts slightly, resting its head against her shoulder in the same gentle gesture it offered on their very first night together, back when neither of them fully understood what their partnership would come to mean. Reyna smiles, understanding now, with complete clarity, exactly why the ancient war beast walked past every polished, celebrated cadet in that long courtyard line, choosing instead the one everyone else had already written off. It was never searching for the strongest soldier, or the most obedient handler, or the cadet with the most impressive record. It was searching for someone capable of leading not through rigid control, but through patience, understanding, and an unshakable willingness to stand firm, even when everything around her suggested she should back down. It was searching, all along, for its own kind of alpha. And in Reyna Kestrel, the cadet nobody wanted, it finally found one. The stars rise slowly over Ironvale Academy that night, casting the same silver light across the courtyard where this remarkable journey first began. Somewhere beyond the academy walls, in the wild borderlands now settling into a fragile but genuine peace, a reunited pack rests safely under the watch of its restored alpha, and the steady, determined handler who helped bring them home. And within the quiet stable, beneath that same rising moonlight, Reyna Kestrel sits beside the legendary war beast that chose her when no one else would, finally understanding that being chosen was never about proving her worth to anyone else. It was about discovering, through trial and trust and unwavering resolve, exactly who she was always meant to become.